Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today we're doing a VBA tutorial, so we're going to be building our own tool that would add rounding to our model. So imagine working on a model and just doing some statements in Excel or whatever, and at some point you realize that you want all those numbers to be rounded. And lately I've been doing the thousands rounding just by rounding it to 3 zeros. So I wouldn't divide it over 1,000, just round it to 3 zeros at the end. And you can do that with round and a minus for the decimal places, something I didn't know you could do in Excel, but it's really helpful. So I wanted to do a macro where once you're done with building all your model, you can just select all the cells where that you want to round, and just the macro would go over all the cells and just wrap the content of each cell with a round function. And at first I did it just to run it and get the result, but then I thought that it's actually a pretty neat tool, and it's really quite easy to develop on your own. And hopefully you're going to learn a bit more about VBA and Excel. By the way, if you're enjoying the videos, like will be awesome and a sub will be amazing. So let's just go ahead and open Excel. First thing, make sure that you have the developer tab here. If you don't have it, just right click anywhere here, go to customize the ribbon, just find it here on the side and enable it. Hit OK, you should see it here. And from here you can open Visual Basic, or you can also use Alt and F11 to show that. We want to be working in the personal XOSB, so here we want to store everything that's always visible within our Excel instances. So you don't see this file, but it's always loaded. If you can't see this file, just close that. Just go ahead and record a macro. Doesn't matter what it is, just do something and then stop recording, and going here you're gonna see it in a new module, and it would create your personal XOSB file. Okay, I'm gonna delete all this. Let's go ahead and add a new form first. So I'm gonna create a user form. Here is our user form. I wanna call it rounding form. And I want the caption at the top to be apply rounding formula. Then let's start adding some controls here. So let's start with a label. And I want this one to say selection. I'm gonna bring that up like that, put it, say, over here. Okay, it looks good. And in order to get our selection, I would like to use this control here. It says unknown, and you might not have this one. You have to enable it. To enable it, just click anywhere here, additional controls. Just scroll down, find, it should be under R, ref edit control, and just enable that. Adding this one would give us a really cool way to select cells. So let's say we run this one. So now what we can do is, once this is enabled, you can just go around and select any selection, and it's gonna type here the reference to this range, or you can also click this one. Okay, then we need our rounding. So we want to give it the number of digits that we want to round to, and I'm just gonna use a simple text box for that. Okay, so this one, let's rename it before we forget. So this is gonna be our selection range reference. And this text box is gonna be our rounding text box. Okay, we won't give any names to the labels because we're not gonna use them. Then we also want to have, I'm just gonna copy and paste those with Control-C and Control-V. I also want to have a preview that will show me how the function will look. Let's just make that a bit smaller. Copy paste it, put it over here, and this will be our preview text box, and this is going to be my result text box. Okay, I want this one to be disabled, so I'm gonna go here, let's go to the enable false, and I'm also gonna lock it just to make sure that this is not editable and we can only edit this. So type in a number here and this will show us how it's gonna look applying our formula, our rounding. Okay, next thing we need are two buttons. So I wanna have a cancel button, cancel, and this is gonna be right under here. Okay, just bring that in a bit, and I'm gonna copy paste this one and put it right over here, and it's gonna be my apply button. Okay, let's extend that a bit, and this one as well. And I'm gonna make those align like that. Okay, that's the design of our form. The only thing left now is just to name those cancel button and apply button. Now that we have how it's gonna look, so the idea would be select some cells here, type in to how many decimals we want to round them, and it's gonna give us some preview here, and then apply it, and it's gonna wrap the round formula around the cell. So if the cell has a number in it, if it's numeric basically, it's just gonna round it, and if it has a formula in it, it's gonna wrap that formula with the rounding, with the round Excel function. Let's go ahead and start writing some code. So always start with the cancel button, it's much easier, and I'm also gonna make sure that cancel equals true. So go to the cancel button, and what we want here is pretty much unload me, and that's it. I'm gonna remove this option explicit because when I'm prototyping, I don't like using it. This pretty much means that every time we use a variable, we have to define it before that. But sometimes, especially when I'm copy pasting code from the internet, I don't want to bother with that. But if you're doing something final that you're going to be publishing or distributing, it's a good idea to have that just to make sure that you don't face any issues with the logic behind using your variables. Now that we have this one, let's go back to our form and start working on our apply button. Just double click on it, and it's gonna attach the click thing here, and you can like change that to double click or whatever, but and for the apply button. But at this current instance, we want the click event. Let's go ahead and start by defining some variables. So we need our selection range, which is gonna be a range. We also need a cell because we want to be able to loop through all the cells that we have selected, and it's also going to be a range. Then we want to have the old formula as a string. So this is the formula that we're going to be manipulating, the formula originally in the cell. And you also want a new formula as string as well. And I want the rounding format from our second field. I'm just gonna type this as variant because it should be an integer, but just to make sure that it's easier to process. And variant is pretty much a variable that can be any other variable, at least that's how I understand it. Okay, then something that I want this to be able to do, I want to be able to have this setting here remembered in the computer. And the easiest way to do that is to save it as a registry key. Go back here, I'm gonna do that, start with it. So save setting is the function that does that. As this is gonna be part of my Magnimetrics tools, I want it to be the app name to be Magnimetrics tools. Then I want the section to be apply rounding, pretty much this macro. And I want the rounding format to be the key as a string, and the value is going to be our rounding text box, Control J to autofill it, yeah, rounding text box dot value. Now that we have this one, let's first start working on a rounding format, because you can pretty much type in anything here, and I just want to make sure that it's a number and doesn't break our functions after that. So what we're gonna do is first we're gonna assign the rounding format, which is as a variant above, equals to rounding text box dot value, and then we're gonna check if is numeric. Okay, rounding format. Then I wanna do something with it, else and end if. So the first thing we're gonna do is the else. So if it's not numeric, so if it's text or something like that, I'm just gonna give it a 0, and I'm also gonna change the value of our text box to 0 as well. But if it is numeric, then I want to see if it's an integer. So if it's an integer, and the easiest way to check that is just to make sure that if it's different, then it's self-cast to an integer. So if it's, let's say, a double, so it has, if it's like 5.6, then this will be 5.6 equals 5 or 6, and it's not gonna work. So if this is the case, then, and let me just close this if, then I want to round it. So rounding format is gonna be equal to rounding format 0. Okay, and you can see that those capitalized, so it means that I typed the whole line correctly. That way we make sure that if it's either an integer, a number rounded to 0 places after the decimal point, or it's set as 0. The next thing I want to make sure is, that our range that we have selected is a proper range, is a valid range. And to do that, we're gonna type in a function up here, and it's the same as a subroutine. So a sub is something that's just run through, and the function actually returns something. So is valid range, and we're gonna pass it a range string as string, and it's gonna return a boolean, meaning that it's gonna return true or false. Here we need to define a range value. And just gonna make sure that on error, resume next, because we're gonna be using a potential error to figure out if it's a proper range. And on error, resume next means that if it comes across an error, it's just gonna continue with the next line. So we want to set the range to be equal to the active workbook dot active sheet dot range, and we're just gonna pass it the range string. And so if this is a proper range string, let's say if this is B2 column C4, this will be set as a range reference here. But if it's if it says like B73 underscore 29 hash, then this will throw an error, and that's what we're gonna use. So if error.number, so the number of the error is different than 0, so if we have an error, then I want to exit the function, and here I'm gonna end my if. And if I just exit the function, this is gonna be a false, so is valid range is gonna return false. And if this doesn't happen, so if the error number is equal to 0, so there's no errors, then I just wanna set is valid range equals to true, and this pretty much sets the name of the function to true, and this is the boolean that's returned. Okay, now that we have our function, we can go ahead and use it here for our next check. So the next thing we're gonna check is the valid range, and I want to see if it's not a valid range. So if not is valid range, and I'm gonna pass the selection range reference dot value. Then, and here I have an end if. So let's say if we have selected a proper range, this will return true, and this not at the beginning will make it to a false. So that's what we're trying to see, if it's not a valid range. If it's not a valid range, you just want to make sure to set it to nothing, and we also want to move the focus to it. Dot set focus. Okay, now I have an error here. You see how those didn't capitalize? Yep, selection. Okay, selection range reference, set focus. And I also want to give a warning. So I'm gonna type in please select a proper range. Okay, and it's gonna be VB critical as the button style, and I wanted to have a title of selection error. And once we do that, I want to exit the sub. So I don't want this subroutine to continue running, because if it's not a valid range, I don't want to loop through it. And this is what we're going to do next. If this doesn't happen, then it means that it is a valid range, so we can just continue and use it. So I'm going to set my selection range, the one that we defined here, to equal the active sheet dot range. And we're gonna get our selection range reference dot value. So let's say if this is just a string value, let's say B2 to C4, it's just gonna convert that into a range from our active sheet. And now that we have this range here, we can start looping through it. I'm gonna use the for each loop cycle for that. So for each cell, and this is this cell here, again as a range, in selection range, we want to do some things, and at the end we want to have next cell to close our for each cycle. So the first thing we want to see is if the cell has a formula. So this is one of the cases that we want to cover. So we're going to use the has formula property. So if cell has formula, then we want to do some things, and else if is numeric the cell. So if it's a number pretty much, then we're gonna do some other things, and then we have end if. And if it just has a text or something like that, this is just gonna skip it. So we're gonna go to the next one because it's not gonna do anything with it. So let's go ahead and see what we want to do if it's a formula. So the first thing we want to do is we're gonna have our old formula equal to cell.formula, and this is a reference to the formula in itself. So if it's, let's say, equals something, this is going to give us that as a string, equals something. Okay, cell formula. Then we want to see if it has already been rounded, because we don't want to round something that's already been rounded. So if left from our cell formula, or here we can actually use old formula. So if the left 6 characters are different than equals to round, then is when we want to do some things. And if it's not, it's already rounded and we do nothing, so we can just have end if here. So what we want to do here is we want to set our new formula string, the one that we defined up here. So our new formula is gonna equal to round. Okay, this is gonna be an equal sign, round. I'm gonna open my brackets. Then I'm gonna concatenate the right side of the formula that we already got here, but just leaving one character from the left out. So this is gonna be, let's say if this is the formula, we're gonna grab this thing here, the right portion, and we're gonna grab the number of characters equal to the number of total characters minus 1. We want to remove this equal sign. So we'll have old formula, and the length that we want is the length of old formula minus 1. Okay, and then we want to concatenate our round function has 2 arguments. First, we give it the formula or the expression that we want to round, and then we have to give it the number of decimal points after the dot. Okay, and here we're gonna give it rounding format, the one that we defined up here. And at the end, we need to close our formula. We are building our formula, so we're taking the original formula that's already in the cell. We remove the equal sign on the left, and we wrap that whole thing in a round formula with the rounding format, which is a number, an integer, how many digits after the decimal points we want, or it's 0 if there was some issue with this one here. If I typed it correctly, okay, everything capitalized, so I guess I typed it correctly. And then we're done with the case where we have a formula. But what happens if it's a numeric cell? Then we can just go ahead and set our new formula, and it's gonna equal to equal sign round, so we open the brackets, and then we're gonna concatenate the cell value because it's a number, and we need our comma, and then again we need our rounding format and our closing bracket. What we have to do both here and here is, after we've prepared our new formula, we need to make sure that our cell.formula is equal to new formula. So we pretty much assign it. Cell.formula equals to new formula. This should be it for our apply button click. Let's see if this works so far. Let's run it. Okay, we can select here. So if we delete that and you just hit apply, please select the proper range. Okay, if we just have something, please select the proper range. That's good, but let's first add some stuff here. So I'm gonna hit cancel. Go back to Excel, and I want to have, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I want a sum here, but this is gonna be like a big number. And this is also going to be a big number, just to make sure that everything works. Now let's run our form again. So I'm going to select this one, which is a formula, a sum formula, round it to -3 points, which is going to show it in thousands. And this is something that I recently learned, that you can actually do it in the normal round formula. So let's apply that and see what happens. And it happened, it rounded it to thousands, and it didn't just round the number. You can see that here we have the formula, round, and then it just placed the sum in it. So it pretty much works, but let's see what happens if we try it on this thing here. Let's run our formula again. Just gonna select this number, apply it to -3, apply, and it turned it into a number which is rounded. And that's a pretty good way to do it, because now I always have the number here. That's why I did it with a formula, and I didn't just convert the number and then place it here. We notice that our rounding format here doesn't get saved, or more correctly, it doesn't get loaded. So here, let's us add user form initialize. So I'm just gonna go here, grab my user form, and it automatically added a click event for it. I don't want the click event, I want the initialize event, and I can just delete this one here. Here, let's go ahead and just make sure that our rounding text box dot value is equal to get setting, and just go ahead and copy it from here. Get setting, Magnimetrics tools, apply rounding, rounding format. And you can give it a default, or you can just leave it. Let's give it a default of 0. Okay, so now if we run that, we have it at -3. And if we type in, let's say 45, and then run it, Okay, it's not gonna work like that, but let's say we run it here, apply, okay. If we run it again, it's gonna be remembering this 45, but I noticed that once we apply it, it doesn't actually close this, and I wanted to close this, so in our apply function here at the end, I'm just gonna have an unload me statement. The only thing that's left to do is make sure that our preview works. So for this, let's go ahead and I want this field here to update every time I change my input field here. So I'm just gonna double click that, and it automatically added the preview text box change method. So let's go ahead and start by defining a few variables. So I want the rounding format as double, and I also want the preview number as double. And then what we want to do is we're going to start with our rounding format, and so we're pretty much going to do the same thing that we did up here. So I'm gonna grab this portion all the way through here. Just wanna make sure that our rounding format is a proper number. And of course, we're not gonna set the rounding text box to 0 because we're not changing the rounding format input that we have, our second input. So there's no point in clearing it, because here we're only changing the preview text box, and we want this to change the result text box. Now that we have this one, let's set our preview number to C double or something like that. And we want this to convert to double pretty much the preview text box value. Then we want to round this, but I noticed when I was trying that the round function that we have here cannot work with negatives, and in Excel it can. So we're not going to use this round function, the VBA round function. We're going to use the worksheet round function, and it's really easy to do that. Just going to use worksheet function.round, and then we're going to pass it our preview number and our rounding format. Okay. And the result text box dot value, we're gonna set it to preview number. And I didn't. Okay, this here is review number. Okay, and now you can see that those here updated. Let's test everything out. So our selection is gonna be this one here. I want it to be at, I want it to be at -3, but let's grab, this one here. And for our preview, okay, so as soon as I'm at 1500, it's rounded to 2000. And you can see how this one works here. But I want to have some default number here. So just gonna actually click here up until it allows me to edit it, and I'm gonna type in 12345.67 or something like that, and it's gonna be the default value. So now when I run that, if I grab this one, I have -3 here, and now all I need to do is change this one. And that's how I get my preview here. But I want this to be loaded, the result text box, to show something from the beginning. So let's hit cancel here again. And an easy way to do that is we're just gonna go to our user form initialize, and we're just gonna make sure that it runs this one at least once. Okay, let's run that. And you can see that now we have it here. So what we need to do is run this once our rounding also changes. Let's go ahead back to the code, and we want to have a preview. We already have a preview text box change, and we want to have a rounding. What was the name of our field? I'm gonna go back to the form, rounding text box. So let's double click on that, and it's gonna add us the text box change. Let's see if this will work. Just want to make sure that we run this one. Okay, we have it here. Grab our selection, type -3. Okay, we got an error. As soon as I type only the negative sign, this will run. It won't recognize it as a number, and it's going to give me an error. So maybe I can make sure that this is at least len2. Okay, let's give this a try actually. So I'm going to go back to the form, and every time our rounding text box changes, I want to make sure that if the length of our rounding text box dot value is above 1, so at least 2, then my end if, then I want to run this preview text box change. Okay, let's run this. Hopefully it's gonna work. -3, yep, it works, and you can see here that we just get 12,000. Apply this one, and it closed, but it ran actually, and it closed. So this one here now is rounded, and you can see we have the round function around the number and to -3. And the best part about this one is that, let's say I can have this is equal to this plus this, and then this is equal to this plus this, and so on. I can run my macro, grab the two of those, and just want to make sure that it's -6. Apply that, and you can see that both those functions got rounded. For a final step, let's make sure that we can actually run that. So it's called rounding form. I'm gonna go into this module 1 that we already did, and I'm gonna create a sub which is gonna be called open rounding form. So it's gonna be rounding form.show. That's pretty much everything we need to do. Let's save this one, go back here, go to the developer tab or any tab, customize the ribbon, and here, let's say those dev tools that I have some stuff here, go to miscellaneous, and I want to add those this here, so I'm gonna go to macros. I'm gonna scroll and find it should start with personal XOSB, so open rounding form, and I'm gonna add it here. Next thing we need to do is okay, let's put in this one and just say apply rounding. Okay, and now if I come here, I have it in here. So if I just have some large number, I select this one, apply. Yeah, I selected the wrong one, and you can see that it's rounded. That's it. I hope you found this useful, and I'm going to be using it quite a lot in my modeling. That's how to create your own user form and a macro that you can use to apply pretty much any kind of function to a selection of cells, and you can change the code and wrap pretty much. You can wrap a if error to all the cells or something like that. So it's pretty easy to customize, and I gotta say I first did it a couple of weeks ago, and so far I've used it pretty much every single day. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and maybe even punch the bell icon to receive notifications every time I upload a new video. Till then, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.